What's going on, guys? Welcome to my review of the latest video game adaptation, Gran Turismo. So this is kind of a weird case because on one hand, it is using the name of a video game property, a very popular video game property from PlayStation, but it's about as much of a video game movie as Rocky is a true story. This movie is essentially telling the true story of Jan Mardenborough, who was a teenage Gran Turismo fanatic. They had this thing called GT Academy. I think he was the third winner of that academy, and it allowed him to take his extreme skills at playing the racing simulator Gran Turismo, the PlayStation franchise, and they allowed him to actually go into professional racing. So this is actually a sports drama. This is a biopic of that real life person, that real life story. And it's a story that I had never heard of before. I feel like as a gamer, I should have got like an email or something. One of us made it, but never heard of it before until I saw this movie and walked in last week. Got to check it out a little bit early. You guys will be able to see it wide, I think, on the 26th, whatever next Friday is. And while I walked in with not many expectations really, aside from curiosity of seeing what Neil Blomkamp was gonna do, and I walked out genuinely liking this movie so much more than I thought I would. Starting off with the positives, this is just a really cool story. It's a really inspiring story, especially if you're somebody who has been a gamer most of their lives, or you have ever had one of those conversations with your parents about, this is never gonna amount to anything, what are you doing? Get out and get a job. Seeing somebody triumph over that is always kind of like a chink in the armor of that argument that you're like, yeah, this can amount to something. Now shut up. And when you boil it all down, it's just an inspiring story of somebody achieving their dream, somebody who realizes their full potential, goes for it, and makes it against all odds, against everybody telling him that he's not good enough, or he doesn't belong there, or that's never in the cards. Those types of stories are always going to be inspiring when they're told well, and I think this was told very well. And I'm not really much of a racing guy, not much of a sports guy in general, if I can be honest, but I love a good sports movie, and Neil Blomkamp directed the shit out of this. Now, he's a guy I've always been a fan of. I really enjoyed District 9. I'm one of those weird people that actually think Elysium is his best film, and I never saw Chappie, though I am curious now after seeing how good Gran Turismo was, because everybody said how bad it was, and sometimes it's not good to trust others, even me. But this is a very different movie for him. He tended to always do kind of high concept sci-fi with action, and this is much more grounded than anything he's ever done before. But his directing skill and his style is very much on display here, especially during the racing sequences, which are among the most intense racing sequences and intense race crashes that I have ever seen in a movie. And for somebody that doesn't really get into the sport and hasn't seen too many racing movies, that was an awesome experience to see in the big gigantic screen that I did. Just how well he crafted and directed those racing sequences. And there's also a really cool stylistic choice here that very much kind of gives this the style of what a video game movie should be, to where they put like the PlayStation indicators of like what place he is in the race throughout it. There's like a visual style that mimics a heads-up display of the game. There's PlayStation signature sounds throughout the entire movie whenever like a piece of text or something comes onto the screen. Very subtle details, but if you're a fan of the video game series or you have been a PlayStation fan at any point, it's going to put a smile on your face. And it added a really cool, distinct flavor to this movie to make it stand out from all the other regular racing movies that have nothing to do with video games. There was even this other visual thing that Neil did that I really enjoyed, to where what the lead character is thinking whenever he is playing the game and imagining he's in a real race, and then the reverse of that when he's in a real race and he's trying to get back into the mental space of when he was playing the game just in his bedroom, to where he's in like this racing simulator pod, and then it kind of digitally creates a car around him in a really cool scene. And then it kind of does the opposite of that whenever he's in a race in one or two spots, where it kind of de-escalates the situation that he's in and puts him back into the safety of his home so he can focus and he can concentrate and he can get back into the zone. Thought that was another cool element. David Harbour, absolutely the heart and soul of this movie. He's the one who's kind of the cantankerous coach, the one that doesn't necessarily believe in all the people that he is pushing, and eventually develops a relationship with Jan, and I hope I'm saying his name correctly. Is it Jan? John? I can't remember. His relationship with the protagonist continues to develop throughout the movie. You get a nice little friendship and almost like a father-son mentor role in there, and we've seen that before, and I'm going to get into a lot of other things in this movie that we have seen before a little later, but I enjoyed that relationship, and David Harbour just has this natural charisma and this natural charm to where he's very good at being that cranky asshole, but when he wants to be more on the heartwarming side, all he has to do is just flip a switch and smile, and you're like, I like that guy, I want to give Hellboy a hug.
You get sloppy, you get hurt, and you lose races! You puked on my lawn.
I also like the score and the soundtrack. It's not going to be like one of the most talked about scores of the year, but it certainly added to the intensity of the racing sequences, and Black Sabbath plays a pretty big role in the soundtrack here, and David Harbour's character is kind of the catalyst for all of that. Never going to complain about that. Moving on to the mixed, the lead performance by Archie Madekwe. I'm probably butchering that name too. I think that most of the movie, he's pretty charming, and he's definitely good at commanding the screen as the lead character here. But I felt like there was moments where I wanted the character to pop a little bit more. I wanted the character to have a little bit more of a standout personality. Luckily, they have David Harbour's character to bring a lot of that charm and that charisma to the movie to where it kind of distracts you from it a little bit. There just wasn't much about the character or the performance that really stood out as like a great lead character that just really pulls you in. It's the story that pulls you in. It's the very interesting non-conventional setup and non-conventional true story that pulls you in, not necessarily the character or the performance itself. So he does a good job, very capable, but I just wanted the main character to have more standout personality. Maybe they were trying to very accurately portray the personality of the real-life racer, possibly, I don't know, but in a movie like this where you're certainly going to take some liberties, I doubt everything in this movie is 100% accurate, I would have preferred a more charismatic lead. Now moving on to the negatives, and the big one is that while this is a very interesting true story that's very non-conventional and it's done very well in my opinion, it is also riddled with cliches. Not only sports movie cliches, but just movie cliches in general. You got the underdog character with a larger-than-life dream, and all the most important people in his life don't give him any support whatsoever, and then he rises through the ranks and tries to prove people wrong. You got the cantankerous coach who almost was the greatest athlete in the world, but something happened that made them fall off their career, and now this is what they do to guide somebody else to have that career that they never had. You have the person that they have to beat who is currently the top dog of the race or the sport, who is not only just the top person because they're a badass athlete, they also have to be a complete asshole that you are supposed to despise for some reason. I mean, I could go on and on and on. And while cliches sometimes can be forgiven, while cliches certainly can be effective in a story, and there's a reason why they've become cliches, because they tend to give a pretty entertaining experience as long as you're not sick of seeing them. And that's going to depend entirely on you. I didn't have my experience completely ruined by them, but I did roll my eyes quite a few times at like, oh, we're doing this thing again. And if you're somebody that watches even more sports movies than me or has even less patience with these cliches than me, that could ruin your experience completely. I also felt like the movie was just a little bit too long. I'm talking like maybe 15 minutes. Like there was never a point where I was bored or I was just dying to get out of the theater. I mean, a runtime of 2 hours is kind of forgiving nowadays when most movies seem to be 3 hours, but there were sections of the movie where it was like, okay, we don't need to spend this much time on this. Let's get going. And part of the reason why in my mixed I wasn't overly enamored with the main character is because I felt like the movie didn't do a very good job at developing his relationships outside of his relationship with David Harbour's character. You have his father played by Djimon Hounsou, which, let's pause for a moment. Why the fuck is this guy not in more movies? Because he's incredible in everything he has ever been in, and you hardly ever see him. Hollywood, this is a star. Cast that motherfucker more often. Whew, rant over. Anyway, his relationship with his father, one of the biggest catalysts for the chip on his shoulder, the one person that he needs the most to be in his corner, who is the more realistic father saying, no, you're gonna be down here in the trenches working some dead-end job with me if you don't get the fuck out of these video games. And by the end of the movie, it comes back around. Again, cliches, you know what's happening, this is not a spoiler. But I felt like I wanted more between those two characters. Like we knew what the resolution was gonna be with their character arc, but I wanted more with them because they had good chemistry. I love seeing Jimon Hounsou, and that was an even more important relationship to develop than the David Harbour relationship, in my opinion, because that's what the kid is fighting for more than anything else, is his father's approval. And beyond that, he has a love interest in this movie that I just felt like was wasted time. Like, again, maybe real life accurate portrayal of the events of this guy's real life story, but I never understood why they were attracted to each other. I never felt like much of the movie was very effective at developing their relationship. It was just like, oh, I have a crush on this girl. Now I'm fucking famous. Now she likes me. And then I start asking a lot of questions like, but did she like you before? We need to know more. And so that attempt to have just one more victory for this guy, if he finally got the girl of his dreams, that was dead on arrival for me. But all in all, I genuinely highly enjoyed this movie. Maybe it was my lowered expectations. Maybe it's because I haven't seen all the other better racing movies out there, but I walked in expecting this to be a decent at best time that I was going to walk out and casually say, if you're a Gran Turismo fan, I guess. And this is one of the best movies that I've seen this entire summer. That's not saying much because there's been quite a few stinkers, but this is going to end up probably being in my top 10 of the year unless the back half of this year just has a ton of hits on its way. Highly enjoyed it. Highly recommend if you're a fan of racing or the video games or this true story to check it out. And even if you're not and you just want an entertaining time at the theaters with some pretty intense racing, check it out. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, please click over here for all of my other 2023 new release reviews. I'm also going to put my review of The Last of Us TV series if you're a video game fan. The best video game adaptation ever. Please like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss everything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.